Hi everyone, welcome back to English for You on our article on potatoes in Ireland. I'm Kat.
And I am Patrick. I'll use the full name since it's an Irish.
Patrick.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, we were talking yesterday about potatoes, how they got to Europe, how they got to Ireland, and how important they were to the Irish, and still are.
Yeah, we looked at the history and found the Spanish brought them to Europe from South America in the 16th century. But the Spanish were kind of indifferent to potatoes. They didn't really care. And potatoes only became an important crop after reaching Ireland. And we kind of looked about, maybe it was Sir Walter Raleigh, this British explorer, maybe it was the Spanish. It's not quite certain, but they got there and they became really important.
Yeah, and the reason was that so many potatoes could be grown on a small plot of land, a small amount of land. And they gave people vitamins and energy, and that was really important for long work days on the farm. And if you couldn't get meat or if you couldn't get milk, you would have to rely on potatoes, and that was your food source.
Yeah, we saw people became dependent on potatoes. And as Kat mentioned yesterday, if you become too dependent on one thing, you're kind of setting yourself up for a fall if something goes wrong.
That's right.
And that's what we're going to look at as we carry on with the story of potatoes in Ireland.
Reading.
The power of the potato in Ireland. The potato helped the population of Ireland double from 4 million in the 1700s to 8 million by the year 1840. Then disaster struck in 1845. The potato crop developed blight, a disease that rots the roots of the potato plant. In 1845, the weather was cool and moist, which allowed the blight to spread quickly. Most of the potatoes grown that year were inedible. The potato crop also failed for the following 4 years. This time is known as the Great Famine. At the time, Ireland was ruled by Great Britain. The British government gave little relief to the Irish. Soup kitchens were set up, but were very limited. In addition, poor farmers had to continue to produce grain, meat, and other foods and export them to Britain while their families starved. An estimated 1 million people died of hunger, and a further million immigrated during the Great Famine. The population dropped to 6.5 million in 1850. The effects of the famine still echo today, as the current population of Ireland is only 5 million.
All right, so what happened with the potato in Ireland? Well, we have to look a little back in the history about 300 years ago. The potato helped the population of Ireland double from 4 million in the 1700s to 8 million by the year 1840.
Okay, that's a big jump.
Yeah.
That's a lot for a fairly small country.
Yes,
Ireland
and Ireland is
not
pretty
big.
small.
Yeah, it would be difficult. I'm not even sure if its population is 8 million now.
It's not.
To be honest. So it was probably pretty crowded, and that means a lot of people relying on potatoes. And as the article says, then disaster struck in 1845.
Oh no.
So a disaster is a terrible thing that happens when everything goes wrong. And we often use it in this way to refer to great big fires, natural disasters like earthquakes, things on a large scale that really cause problems for everyone. You could also use it in slightly more of a fun sense to mean everything went wrong. Dinner was a disaster. Everything burned. My job interview was a disaster. I was late and said the wrong things. The date was a disaster. We hated each other. But here we mean great big problems that affect many people seriously. For example, Taiwan suffered a disaster on September 21st, 1999, when a huge earthquake struck the center of the island. So what was this disaster?
Well, it has to do with potatoes. It can't have been an earthquake or a fire or anything because those would not affect potatoes.
No.
What happened was the potato crop developed blight. a disease that rots the roots of the potato plant. So a blight, it's a disease that affects plant populations, like in a big way, and it makes them dry up and die. And so, you'd pull a potato out of the ground, it would just be like a little raisin, a dead potato raisin, and it was just gone.
Yeah, and there are different blights and they affect different crops in different times and places.
Trees too.
Yeah, so this rots the roots of the plant. When something rots, this is when bacteria or fungus or things like that destroy a kind of food. Generally, it turns it black, it makes it fall apart.
And stink.
Yeah, it can often affects wood as well, even when the wood has already been cut and turned into stuff. And when it is kind of going dark and falling apart like that, we use the adjective rotten, R-O-T-T-E-N, which is also the I don't think it's the PP because we say rotted. But we'd use rotten as the adjective.
That's right.
Yeah, when it's being affected in this way. So you might say, these vegetables at the back of our fridge are starting to rot. We need to throw them out right away.
Exactly. So the potatoes were rotting because of the blight. In 1845, the weather was cool and moist, which allowed the blight to spread quickly. You think of how fast things get moldy in Taiwan. That kind of weather was happening in Ireland, and so this disease just spread and spread. So we're talking about the air and the weather was very moist. Let's learn about what that means. So moist is an adjective that means there's a lot of water, especially in the air or in the ground. Something that's, if your clothes are moist, they're not dripping wet, but they will have some water. You can still feel that they're a little bit wet. So especially when moisture is in the air, we call the air damp. Or when it's moisture in the air and it's hot, we call it humid. And Taiwan is often humid. So another example, you could say, the air is so moist in my house that it makes my food go bad quickly. So apparently the moisture in the air made the blight spread all across the island, all across all the farmland, and that was a bad thing.
Right, because what we learn is that most of the potatoes grown that year were inedible. So you'll notice there we got rid of a couple of words from that sentence. We could say most of the potatoes that were grown that year were inedible, but you can get rid of the that were. It's just something that English does. Gets rid of words that you don't really need. It's obvious what the sentence means. We also see the word inedible there. If something is inedible, it's unable to be eaten, either because it could cause harm or just it's too tough or hard or whatever. Wood, we would say, is inedible. But if food is inedible, that means, I just cannot eat this. I'll get sick. It's gone absolutely bad.
And the opposite would be edible. Something is edible, that means you can eat it safely and usually deliciously. So the article goes on to say the potato crop also failed for the following 4 years. So 5 years of dead potatoes.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Well, starve would be the answer, and because of that, we see in the article this period of 4 or 5 years, is known as the Great Famine. The word famine means a time when there is no food available for many people for an extended period of time. So you might hear about there's a famine in this part of the world, there was a famine that year in history.
Right now there's a famine in Yemen, I think, isn't there? Yeah.
Something like that. And so this time in 1845 to 1850 is known as the Great Famine. If something is known as something, then we're giving you the common name that someone or something is called by many people and thought of as. So if you Google Great Famine, you'll get results about Ireland at this time. That's what it's called by many people in history books and references to it.
Yeah, and it's also called the Irish potato famine for obvious reasons. So there are a couple of different names for it, but famine is the common word for it. So the article says, at the time, Ireland was ruled by Great Britain.
Now, that was the case for many countries around there.
Yep.
Now, right now, Ireland is not ruled by Great Britain.
Yeah, Ireland is its own country now.
Yeah, but it's part of Europe. Only the little bit in the north, Northern Ireland, is still part of Great Britain, follows the rules of the British government, and so on. But at that time, the whole country was, and that didn't help the Irish much. We see in the article, the British government gave little relief to the Irish. Here, when we're talking about relief, we mean food, clothes, money, medicines, and things like that that are given to people who are in urgent need of help. For example, because there's a war going on there was an earthquake there was some other disaster in the country, many people are in need of something, so other countries, charity organizations, ordinary people give money, give food, they send relief there to help the people. So earlier this year there was a big disaster and there's an example sentence that goes with that. Relief was sent to Turkey and Syria after a big earthquake struck there in February 2023. So these days when there is a disaster, many countries will try to send relief. But when this happened back in 1845, only Britain was going to send help, and it just didn't.
Yeah, I mean, they just really didn't care. And that, yeah, at the time there was a lot of criticism of the British government. I think there was even a famous essay called A Modest Proposal that was written at that time. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about how did they get help. The article says soup kitchens were set up, but were very limited.
So a soup kitchen's just a place where you can turn up and ask for food, basically.
Yeah, basically they give you soup, they give you some kind of cheap food that will keep you going.
Yeah, it's not always soup, it's just whatever is available that can be made in enough quantities to give to people.
Yeah.
But we see they were very limited, so the food ran out, they weren't everywhere.
They weren't everywhere.
Yeah, and there was worse going on at the time. We see, in addition, poor farmers had to continue to produce grain, meat, and other foods and export them to Britain while their families starved.
I cannot believe that anybody would enforce that.
Yeah,
that's crazy to me.
So there were still farms, they were growing other things that weren't potatoes, but they couldn't eat them because they were being exported. If something is exported, it is sold abroad or sent abroad for sale in a different place. So you could say tea from Taiwan is exported all over the world. It's sent out, it's sold. The opposite is import, which means it's bought abroad and then brought here.
That's right. And tea from Taiwan is exported all over the world, but Taiwanese people still have enough tea to drink themselves. So there's not the same problem. But because they were exporting all of their crops to Britain, people were starving. People starved. And so starve is this verb that means to suffer or even to die from lack of food. So if you are so hungry that you can't get any food and you are losing weight, you're sick, or you might even die, that's starving. You called the noun starvation. So lots of people starve during famines, and it's a really big problem. And even today, it's not like there are not people starving in the world, there are. So an example sentence, while people in rich countries eat as much as they want, people in poor countries are starving to death.
Now, of course, you can use starving in kind of a fun way. A lot of people say, oh, I'm starving, I didn't eat lunch today. But that's not really starving. You're just very hungry.
The same with famish.
Yeah, this is the real, like, you are going to die if you don't get food kind of starving. And people did die. The article says an estimated 1 million people died of hunger, and a further million emigrated during the Great Famine. So we'll look at the second part of that sentence in just a moment, but first we're going to take a look at the word estimated. We often use estimate as a verb, and it means the same as guess. So estimated as an adjective is just used to show a general number. It's based on a certain amount of evidence. You've kind of tried to find out some info, but it's not actually correct and 100% accurate. Of course, there's no way to tell exactly how many people died in Ireland during those times. It's just we're guessing based on population numbers based on what data we have from that time. So instead of saying exactly 1.75 million people died, we're saying an estimated 1 million. It was around that number. Could be higher, could be lower, could be a lot higher for all we know, but we're taking a pretty good guess at the number.
So we also saw that during that time, there was 1 million people who died, but there were also another 1 million people who emigrated from Ireland. Emigrate means to leave a country or a region to live elsewhere. Usually we would say you emigrate from somewhere because you're talking about the country that you're leaving from. However, you could also say you emigrate to somewhere, which means you're talking about the country that you're going to. So during this time, a lot of people emigrated from Ireland, and many of them ended up in the US, which is how I learned about the Irish famine, because I heard about it through the immigrants who came to the US, and that many US people are still descended from the Irish. There are many Irish Americans.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that meant the population of Ireland fell. Remember, we got up to about 8 million, but now we see the population dropped to 6.5 million in 1850. So that's like 1.5 million people just gone, either moved or left, and not many people being born.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you don't want to have babies when you can't feed them. The effects of the famine still echo today, as the current population of Ireland is only 5 million. They haven't had a blight since then, I don't think, or if they have, it's been minor.
Small scale, and it can be dealt with, and it's, you know...
They have more modern farming.
Right, and they have other alternatives. They're not completely dependent on that potato.
Plus, Ireland is its own country, so it can import and export goods as it wants to.
Right, but if you go to Ireland, you'll still find there's a lot of other stuff in Irish history related to the famine, about the roads that were built at that time to give people food. They were basically roads to nowhere, just to give people work, to give people food, but for no good reason. They could have tried to have been growing other things instead of just building roads that went nowhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a whole other set of stories and research and history about the Irish potato famine, its effects and everything like that.
Yeah.
We haven't got time to go into all of it, but now you've got an idea of the history and of the potato's importance to the country.
That's right.
So that brings us to the end of the article. So let's now go to our For You Chat question.
For You Chat.
So our question is, what food do Taiwanese people depend on the most, in your opinion? That last bit means you don't actually have to get the right answer. This isn't a test question. This is just, what do you think?
Right. Well, I mean, if I were to guess, it would be rice and sweet potatoes. Well, maybe not sweet potatoes now, but previously, apparently when Taiwan was ruled by the Japanese, people depended on sweet potatoes a lot, especially poor people.
Okay, yeah, because same as the potato, the way they're grown, the amount that can be grown in an area.
Easy to grow.
Exactly. So, apart bubble tea? No.
That's just a treat.
That's just kind of being...
maybe wheat.
Bit of a joke, yeah, maybe. Rice would be one of the obvious ones because the flour can also go into noodles and other things like that.
Yeah.
I would have thought tofu is...
Tofu,
is
soy in general.
Yes, soybean milk, eat the beans, make all the different tofu products. I would say that's also got to be pretty high because of its use as a protein source.
Very true.
Especially for people who won't eat meat. Obviously, the Buddhist religion, people will avoid meat, but they will eat tofu. So
right now,
got to be high.
Right now, what people are hurting from the most is the lack of eggs.
Yeah.
Right now, when we're filming this, the egg shortage is happening. I can go to the supermarket and I either find no eggs or I have to pay a bunch of money for one packet.
Yeah, you might as well just buy an actual real chicken and get it to do the work.
I can't get a chicken on my rooftop. I can't do that.
Probably not. Okay, so though it's the obvious things: rice and sweet potato, maybe sort of soybean
and wheat
food.
and soy.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But that is here. Other countries will have their own different foods that are really important to them. Maybe not so much right now, but in the past were absolutely key to people's survival.
Yes.
But that is all the time we've got. Thanks for watching us today, everybody. For English for You, I'm Pat.
And I'm Kat.
And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Disaster. The recent storm was considered a disaster, as it had destroyed thousands of people's homes. Rot. James wanted to burn the wood on the fire, but it had rotted in the rain. Moist. The air was moist, and small drops of water formed on the windows. Relief. After the earthquake, the government provided relief to the affected families. Export. A lot of Taiwan's farm produce, such as rice and tea, is exported to other countries around the world. Starve. Mom, if I don't eat dinner in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to starve.
智慧小补帖。
Blight. Estimated. Emigrate.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net